Hey everybody, it's Ian from UKEartswork.info. Today talking to you about the permitted paid engagement concessionary route to come into the UK as a creative, whether that be a musician, dancer, filmmaker, photographer, etc, etc. This permitted paid engagement route can also be applied for by visa nationals, though that's somebody who needs a visa to get into the UK. Non-visa nationals cannot apply for the visa, but they can turn up at the border and request entry on that basis. So what happens and what are the criteria? Okay, in order to work using this route and enter the UK using this route, you need to come to the UK border, wherever that might be. If it's in Calais, for example, because the French and UK immigration are reversed, they're on each other's territory. In Calais, you would go up to an immigration officer, you would hand over your passport, you would hand over your invitation letter, clearly stating your name and preferably passport number, etc, etc. The invitation letter should come from a UK organisation or client and show that you're being paid to do a show in the UK. The criteria are quite clear and specific. If you look at the page on permitted paid engagements in the description below, you'll see that you must have been invited to engage in an activity, a paid activity that relates to your main job. And if you look further down the page, you will also see it says your main overseas job. You may have other jobs. Many musicians do, many actors do, many photographers do, blah, blah, blah. But this has to be your main job. Now, how that is defined is maybe open to interpretation. If, for example, you do 40, 50, 60 hours a week as a musician, but you have another job working as a gardener or an architect or whatever, it depends how that's defined. Okay. So the other things that you may be asked for are proof of your professional status, so that you are what you say you are. You may be asked to show you have enough money to live on whilst you're in the UK. These are things that are asked anyway, or can be asked anyway, by anyone entering any other territory. But it's really important to understand, using this route, there is a risk of refusal by the immigration officers. They have the power invested in them by the government to make these decisions. They apply the rules as they see them. And what I would suggest, as I suggest on all routes, whenever you're passing borders, make sure you have documentation with you from official UK government website, for example, coming into the UK, showing the criteria and the rules. And if you get into a conversation, argument with an immigration official, not a customs official, then you can show them this and you can refer to the documentation and say this, this and this. Now, although you have no right of appeal if you've been refused at the border, you can argue your case, of course, and the more documentation you have to prove you are who you say you are and you are eligible to use that route, the better. So that's PPE. If you've got a certificate of sponsorship, that's a different matter, because the sponsor, the licensed sponsor, I'm one, for example, but there are many in the UK, sponsor for creative arts only, can issue you a certificate of sponsorship. Fees vary a lot, from not very much to ridiculous amounts of money from some visa companies. Or the venues that you're playing at might be licensed sponsors, in which case they can either sponsor you for the entire period you're going to be in the UK, or they can sponsor you just to do your date at their venue. There is a provision whereby certificates of sponsorship can be done for each venue sequentially, but must only be for those dates. I'll not get too heavily into this, but it is possible, but only if those venues, promoters, are licensed sponsors. If they're not licensed sponsors, you either have to go to an agency or a third-party sponsor like myself to get a certificate of sponsorship. As I said, fees vary. There's a lot of variation. The sponsor should have checked you are really who you say you are in terms of your work. They should check that with your passports, ID, credentials, etc. And they can tick a box on the application process, which they have access to on the government website, the sponsorship management system. They can tick a box saying they will support you financially in the event of being required to do so. That means you don't have to present at the border any financial documents. So there you go. Permitted paid engagement visa. Visa concession, because this is for a non-visa national coming in. That includes all EU citizens if they do not have a UK passport or right to remain or right to work in the UK. And it includes all other third country nationals. It is a route in that's legitimate and that has been used for many years by many people. Mostly it works, but there is always a risk of rejection at the border, which the immigration officer can legitimately point to the regulations and say, you do not fulfill this, this, or this. With a certificate of sponsorship, it's safer, but there is a cost involved, or there's no cost involved if one of the venues you're playing is a licensed sponsor. Always ask them. It's important. Or they may know someone who can do the certificates. And then maybe they will pay for it, or the tour will pay for it. I hope that's of use, and it relates specifically to some news at the moment. Excuse me. It's now early April 2023, and keep checking in. Do subscribe, and hope we can be of help to you in the future. Check the links in the description, and bye for now.